Hey, everybody. Welcome out to our episode tonight. We're going to be talking about motorcycle trips and some tips from our perspective. We're going to have a guest on with us tonight, Gremlin, um, and we're going to hear some of his experiences as well as some of my experiences. And you can go ahead and post in the comments any questions that you have for each of us. We're going to go ahead and do a little intro clip and then we'll get into it. All right, everybody, we got Gremlin here with us. How's it going, Grim?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I like that that music you got in the beginning. It's
Yeah,
got a nice bass line, some good power chords. Kind of
yeah, it's
gets the
nice.
mood set up real nice.
Get you all amped up, makes you want to get on your motorcycle and ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
How's that course treating
Exactly.
you?
Well,
Cheers.
it's course. Can't go wrong. Cheers, cheers, brother. Glad to be here. We've
Yeah,
been
so
on a ton of we've known each other forever, right?
yeah,
For a real long time.
we have, and we've been on a lot of motorcycle rides together.
Yeah. Many miles spent, many ups and downs and middles, but we're here for all of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what was our let's see, our first trip we did together was to Yellowstone National Park, right?
Yeah, dude, that was when I think the club had only been established for a few months. And like, this is quintessentially like what I've always dreamed of was to get out with a group and ride and check out the countryside. And before that point, believe it or not, I never been to Yellowstone. So when you guys were gracious enough to invite me along, I was all about that. I It was a learning experience. There's a lot of things I probably wouldn't do again. And I feel like I learned something new every single trip, but that was a phenomenal trip, honestly. It kind of opened my eyes up to what friendship and brotherhood could look like. At the time, I don't think I had a real full concept of it, but it gave me at least an idea about it. What year was that? Was 2017,
Yeah,
wasn't
that
it?
was the summer of 2017.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what good memories.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a couple things on this episode. We're going to talk about preparation for trips, and we're going to talk about some elements that make trips successful, and also some elements that can completely ruin your trip or ruin the vibes of the trip, right? But before we get into that, Graham, do you feel like motorcycle trips are worth it?
Oh, hell yeah. Like, without question, some of my most treasured memories in life, so that I'm setting up a high pedestal, are from motorcycle trips with my best friends and brothers. Some of those experiences, good and bad, I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. Um, they're a big element of what we're all about. When we ride our motorcycles and we go on adventures together. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel the same way. The brotherhood that you have when you're riding, across state lines with your brothers, and you're just pounding pavement, and you're pretty much riding all day long, and you're stopping, and you're seeing some really cool stuff along the way. I mean, there's nothing better. I would agree with you, and I think it makes it worth the amount of time and energy, and also, what money you're spending to go on the trip, right? Because it's, there is a cost with it, and that includes taking time off work, and that includes, getting your supplies and getting ready to go on the trip, as well as food and gas for the trip, right, and lodging. So
That got me thinking of something. So that's like a big thing to factor in, right? For any vacation or trip, there's going to be a cost. But what's awesome about motorcycle trips is they can be either as cheap or as expensive as you want, depending on what level of comfort you're good with for given trip. And I think that's something that is incredible is like no matter what your income level is, you plan out a trip, pretty much almost everybody is going to be able to make it and share those memories with each other.
Yep. Hey, just wanted to welcome out Scooby. If you have any questions, go ahead and shoot Graham and I messages. So, no, I agree. So we've been on both sides of that trip, right? We've been on ones where we've,
Hmm.
spent a little bit more dough, and we've, especially ones that we bring the wives with us, and we get some fancy Airbnbs or some hotel
Hmm.
rooms. Go out to eat a little bit nicer. Do you have a preference on what type of trip, that you enjoy more going on?
Yeah, honestly, if I had to pick, I'd probably do a mixture of both. And I'll tell you why. So, like you said, you have your nice, bougie, nice trips where you got Airbnb and everything. And then you have your trips where you're basically just staying on the side of truck stops and sleeping by your bike. I think both can offer incredible experiences. Um, I don't know, like it's wild. Like, I think when you're in an instance where you're just camping by your bike, there's a certain element of exposure, right? And it's just you and the elements and your brothers and your bike. And there's something almost visceral about that. I don't know, something primal about that. And you're able to pull things out of people that you might not if all the comforts are in place. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's like a stress test for your brothers, right? And
Yeah,
yourself
yeah,
is like you see where people's breaking points are, right? You see
100%.
when people are going to get a little ugly, when they're going to get a little nasty with you. Is it's easy to, um, I guess, be the best brother you can be when you're only seeing them a couple times a week or something. But when you're with them nonstop, for the duration of 5 days or however long your trip is, I mean, you see the good, bad, and the ugly with them, right?
Oh yeah, like without question. I mean, that's so there's a lot of a reasoning by why motorcycle clubs do certain things, and you'll notice that a lot of motorcycle clubs, ours included, will invite prospects and hangarounds out on some motorcycle cross state trips. And a big reason for that is you get to really peel off the layers because you can put on a mask. Anybody can put on a mask and play a part, but you really find out who a man really is after 600 miles in the hot sun, little to no breaks. You start seeing what they're all about real quick. So I love it for that. And for people that are able to kind of step up to that role. And we'll talk about more what that looks like, but it's incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah,
So I don't know about you, but like I'm procrastinate prepping for trips a little bit myself. I probably need to do better about that as far as the prep work goes. But let's talk about club trips from your perspective, and I'll kind of add to it. What are
sure.
some things that you do, brother, to get ready for when we're going to go on a club trip together, or you're getting ready to go on a ride, or take your motorcycle out camping?
So unfortunately, we're two peas in a pod in that we're like the worst procrastinators ever. We're similar in that regard, but I've tried to get better over the years because there's been years where I've forgotten things, and that's kind of how I learn from shit. Is I'll just make mistakes, so I'll try and auto regulate in the future. That's the only thing that's probably kept me alive is that I sometimes learn from my mistakes. So if I'm doing my best, what I'll do and what we'll have our road captain usually do, or whoever's leading the ride. It's not always a road captain. Sometimes just a small group of brothers and friends. You put out a list of essentials, things that are absolutely needed, without question, no debate, that you're going to need. And I usually will refer to those lists. And at the very least, even with my procrastinating, I try to get that done at least 48 hours before the trip. Um, that way, I have time to let it run through my head if I've forgotten anything for whatever reason. But if you do it at least 48 hours before your trip, have all your shit laid out, have a checklist, you'll usually be pretty set. And that's what I find has helped me to not forget anything and to prepare. I think also like we always remember like the big thing to remember is obviously like what you're packing, right? But you got to remember you're riding on two wheels, and a lot of these motorcycles, I mean, they're not they're designed to be checked about every 5,000 miles. So a vital part for safety, and so you don't inconvenience all your brothers on the trip, is to do all your pre-checks beforehand. Um, get any maintenance that needs to be done on it. If you know that your brakes are going down and they're nearing very close to where they need to be switched, just be proactive and switch them out. Don't wait till after the trip. If you know your oil is low or any of that, top it off. Um, the worst thing I think, and you can attest to this too, I'm sure, is when you have someone coming out and maybe they procrastinated a little too much, including the bike prep, and you get them out on the ride and you find out all their shit's falling off their bike. I mean, yeah, like there's the whole like joking about Harley and stuff, but
Sure. Yeah.
Loctite exists, and if you just make sure everything's ratcheted down, you should be pretty good to go.
Yeah, so I would also add to that, that's part of the experience sometimes on trips is dealing with those issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real part of it. And I also think that that can be a brotherhood building experience when you're dealing with, problem solving on the side of the road, trying to fix brothers' bikes. But I also would agree with you that, taking that time ahead of time to minimize that is the best, route to go, right? I think the big things that I do personally for my bike checks is I probably spend more time on my bike than I spend doing everything else because, being in the Army, I'm like, I'll live, right? But
Right, that's your biggest bottleneck. If you don't have a bike, you're not moving. You usually can find a Walmart for other shit, but if your
right,
bike's
or
down,
gas
you're
stations, I can eat gas station food. I can get,
Mhm.
most of my supplies places, but um, I do check my tires, before I go. I make sure that I have enough tread on my tires. I do check my brakes and I do make sure that my fluids are topped off. And I go around my bike and I start, with some Allen wrenches and just making sure that stuff's tight, right?
Yeah.
Those are the things that I do have. And I think with that is making sure that I have, the proper set of tools for my bike personally, to be able to handle some, common things that might happen with my bike. So personally, I have a little Harley toolkit that I keep in my saddlebag, that has all the standard size wrenches and everything for my Harley.
That's phenomenal advice, dude. And real quick, I want to read Kenny Knapp put up the funniest comment. He said, "Lies. We all know checks are done during the ride, halfway through when your bike breaks down on a rainstorm." And oh my God, isn't that the truth, man?
Hey, and we've been there,
Oh,
right? And this is
we
some of the
have.
reason why we're
We
giving this advice
absolutely
out
have.
in this video is because
Mm,
we've been in those type of situations, and like our preference is to not have to deal with that, right?
yeah.
Um,
You can't plan for everything, but the whole idea of trip prep is like minimizing as much problematic issues as you can. You can't get rid of everything. That's impossible. That's just the nature of riding a motorcycle. If you want your whole life planned, sorry, you ride a motorcycle. You could die at any moment. So, but there is a lot of steps you can do to minimize potential problems on a trip, you know, and
yeah, and
those
I just
little
want to
things
bring
go a
up
long way.
I want to bring up Scooby Doo's comment too, and he talks about the best night he had on the trip was when he was with a couple brothers on an iron button sleeping on the sidewalk. Hey, I've been there. I've been sleeping on the sidewalk at a rest stop, and you got people driving through all night waking you up, and but it's nothing a good bottle of whiskey can't solve most of the time. So.
Cheers. Ugh, yeah.
Yeah, and welcome to the
Um,
show, Kenny.
yeah.
So you talked
Yeah.
about packing. We talked a little bit about bike maintenance. I talked about I make sure that I bring a toolkit for specifically for my bike. What are some things that you make sure that are essentials for you when you pack?
Um, real quick to echo, I'll answer that, but to echo the thing about the tool kit. So, in my opinion, everyone who owns a motorcycle should understand at least how to do basic bare minimum maintenance. And if you don't know what that looks like, we're in the age of the internet. You could find anything and everything on there that'll break down exactly what you need for your bike, its year. You can find forums. Hell, I've seen it where you could find like traveling tool kits that are literally designed for your bike.
Yeah.
So you have everything you need in a little roll up, and you're good to go. If you don't know how any of it works, ask a friend, ask a brother. Reach out to other people in the motorcycle community. Watch some YouTube videos, man. They're just such a wealth of knowledge that there's really no real excuse to not at least have a couple of basics uh, inside of your holster of information. To answer your other question, what are some other things I do to help prepare? Or let me
Yeah.
make
What
sure
are
I
some
answer
things
that
that
right.
are essentials that you pack?
Yeah, so specific examples. Um, I'll bring water. Hydration's huge, especially if you're riding through the desert. And I know for a lot of people, it's something that's hounded into a lot of us that maybe grew up in scouting. I know there's folks watching who were in the military. They always emphasize hydration, but it's no joke. When you're out in like dry heat, for example, um, you get dehydrated super quick and you dry up super quick. And like heat exhaustion is not too far of a stretch. It's always preventative, making sure you have enough water before the fact. I usually bring a couple of snacks. Everybody packs a little different as far as essentials goes. Essentials might mean something to different people, but I feel like largely with motorcycle traveling, where you're doing more than just one night, um, will depend on how much luggage you have. I like to go light as possible, no matter what kind of trip. And it's the same idea when I'm backpacking. Um, Less is more sometimes. Your like weight is such a massive factor on a motorcycle, um, where if you have like a ton of extra weight, you're gonna feel it. Your those super world famous twisties that you're riding through, well, guess what? You're going to have to really tone it down a lot because your bike's overpacked. So, whatever you can do to kind of go less, here's what I honestly do. I bring one pair of pants. That's it. I will bring, I have, and that same pair of pants is what I'm wearing. And then obviously the shirt on my back. Um, Things that I will pack extra of are like your underwear and your socks. I like to have a fresh pair of those every day because there's some days where you don't know if you're going to get to a shower, and the worst thing in the world is riding with horrific swass, if you will. It just irritates and it's no fun at all. So I bring extra pairs of those. Um, I have a backpacking sleeping bag that I'll bring that packs like super ultra small. Same thing with my pad. Um, I usually will pack a tent that's a backpacking tent as well. And if you're really trying to cut down on weight, what I would almost recommend is you split the weight of that tent between like two or three people, depending on how big the tent is. Because most nights, honestly, unless it's actually pouring rain, I won't sleep under a tent. And that's just because it's just one less thing to do in the morning to get back out on the road.
And it's part of
So,
the experience, right?
exactly. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like a flashlight. Usually I have that on my phone, but
Yeah, they
I
do like a
try to bring a
headlamp, right?
headlamp.
Like a
Yeah.
headlamp is nice when you're cruising
Headlamp
around
is
at
a little
night.
more ideal. Yeah, because it's so much easier to find your stuff. You don't have to
And
like
you
pull
gotta
the
you gotta pick
flashlight.
things that have like multiple purposes, right? Is like a headlamp is awesome because not only is it used at night, but like, hey, like let's say you're working at your bike at night and you need a headlamp because you're trying to use your hands while you're working on a bike. And a lamp is great. A flashlight is not so great if you're trying to, use your hands to work on a bike or something, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Headlamp will go a long way. Oh, speaking of like the whole underwear socks thing, there are people that I've watched like their videos on traveling on motorcycle, and there's some people that go so hard in the paint with making their bike light that they won't even bring extra underwear or socks, which is disgusting. But what they will do instead is they'll just buy replacements at Walmart and just chuck out the old ones. And I was like, all right, that's smart. I can get behind that.
Yeah, so I would agree with you. Is like pack light, right? I did the same thing. Like I think when I first started, I brought two pairs of jeans because I was like, what if I get caught in a rainstorm or whatever? That, but the fact is you're riding. Those are going to dry out. They're going to win. They're going to air out in the wind, right? They're going to dry
Hmm.
out.
Exactly.
I just bring
Yeah.
a pair of gym shorts. I bring my jeans, and I do bring extra pairs of socks and underwear, like you said, and I
Yeah.
bring a waterproof, windbreaker and a hoodie. And I think between those things, I'm pretty much covered as far as clothing goes. I also do bring a net gaiter or something to cover me because I'm a fair skinned dude and I don't like getting sunburned. So
I
I would
feel
say
that.
always bring, sunblock for guys like us, right? So
Hmm.
sunblock is awesome because that kind of goes with your hydration. I think when you're having fun riding your motorcycle, you often forget to hydrate because you're distracted having fun, and you often
Hmm.
forget to do sunscreen, and those things can make your trip miserable, right? So hydrate and use sunblock. I want to touch on something here. Let's see. Scooby Doo shows this. It says balance your weight on the bike if you're packing stuff on the sides or in bags. So I think this is a great comment. It makes me think of the Army when you're getting new privates in your unit and you're going on ruck marches, and you see these guys coming and their bags are all packed and they look like, they're all loose, and you get rucking with them and they're kind of all leaning over to the left like this as they're hiking because they got the weight, not balanced in their rucksack. Um, this is the same thing, right? Is learn how to pack your bike efficiently. Learn how to pack it tight. Learn how to minimize what you're bringing, and learn how to balance it because that will affect how your bike performs, especially in turns and other things as well.
I've seen people hit mad speed wobble because their shit wasn't packed right. It's no joke. Like you could die if your stuff isn't packed correctly. So that's good. That's a good hint, Scoobs.
Let's see. Jonathan says, any good recommendations for toolkits to carry in your saddlebags? I'm
Oh
just going to
yeah.
be simple. Just look on Amazon. If you have a Harley, just type in Harley toolkit, and I think they're about like $120, and there's different versions of them. That's what I would recommend. It's a lot cheaper than the Harley version. And then Kenny mentions right here that the only thing he would add is a 72-hour survival kit, which is a good idea.
Oh, that brings up another point that point made me think of is first aid. Right. We never like to think about potential physical trauma that could happen as a result of a unforeseen motorcycle accident. They have phenomenal first aid kits, trauma kits on Amazon as well that you can look up, and it'll give you pretty much everything that you need. In addition to that, learn how to actually use a trauma kit.
Right.
We got our group into a local class done by the fire department for dealing with trauma, particularly trauma relating to motorcycle accidents. One of the most common sorts of things. It's one thing to have the tools, but you really want to know, how to use them. Worst case scenario. So that's a
Yeah.
really good thing to add to your packing kit as well. In general, to be honest, if you can, um, just help, especially if you're riding with people. Just be that guy to bring an extra layer of safety.
Right. I mean, I carry one in my saddlebags too. So,
Hell yeah.
um, so we talked about prep work on maintenance for our motorcycles, things that we're packing on our bikes. What about the prep work it takes in, planning the trip?
This is, I think it's an ongoing conversation with this because we're always finding ways to improve. I never want to get to the point in our group where we think we know it all because we come back learning something new from every trip. So, a couple things that I've learned that does help is understanding who is going on your trip, um, because that will drastically change how you plan for it. For instance, is it just you and the brothers, or is it brothers and wives as well? Because I know there's some wives that are metal and they can rough it and they're, pretty much GI Jane, but a lot of wives don't, and they think of a good time, they don't want to sleep on the side of a motorcycle on a truck stop. So planning accordingly for who your group is huge, and doing it well in advance. Um, Especially like, so there's some places where if you don't plan well enough in advance, you're going to struggle finding spots to camp, or it's going to be a little more inconvenient. Um, and again, like, is your trip going to be more of like location base, or is it more just cut right through? Doesn't matter where we sleep. Like, just figuring those things out and then planning it out in advance. Depending how big your group is, you can really have a situation where there's too many cooks in the kitchen. If you're trying to collaborate with 15, 20 other people, I promise you won't make any progress. Get one person to a subcommittee of like a couple people to plan everything out and figure out all the details. It'll just be way more streamlined. If there's reservations, you do all of that well in advance, especially Sturgis. If you're doing the Airbnb thing there, it fills up really quick over there. Um, and just talking in advance, like for us, we'll start talking about trips sometimes up to a year before going on said trip. And it's just something you always want to have on your mind. Um, trying to think what else is helpful. Make sure expectations are set well in advance with people. You, the planner, might know what you want or know what kind of ride it's going to be, but it doesn't mean everybody else can read your name. You might have one person who's expecting to have you know, a super nice, comfortable trip, and then the planner might, really want to push it hard and not have a lot of downtime. So just setting expectations with people and making sure everybody's clear before it even starts.
No, I agree with you on having those rough itineraries is very helpful. And
Mm-hmm.
once again, that's part of what the road captain is for. The road captain is basically the president on the road, right? When we're riding as a motorcycle club. And so a lot of this work is going to be on the road captain, but we just need to make sure we're doing our part to support him in his job. And I think the itinerary and knowing what the day is supposed to look like is important because of this. Is like we get so caught up in just the free spirit of riding sometime and just be like, oh, this looks fun. Let's go ride over here, which is awesome, right? But you got to keep in mind is how many hours of daylight do you have left? And yeah, it's okay to ride for a little bit at night, but like you also don't want to be getting into your rest stop or wherever you're sleeping at like 2 a.m. Right. And so I do think being mindful of like your general agenda and itinerary is important. Um, let's see. I got a comment here I want to touch on. It says, Maverick, how's it going, brother? He says, how long do you ride between stops to prevent fatigue? I would say that this is, situation dependent, right? Is, maybe on the first day you're feeling awesome and you're doing, a lot bigger stretches, right? I think this also depends on the type of bikes that are in the formation. Do you have Sportsters in the formation or bikes that have smaller gas tanks? These are all things that you need to be mindful of, on your trip. Just planning appropriate stretches. I would say that we probably average about 100-mile stretches in between rest stops. Does that sound about
Mm-hmm.
right, Graham?
100%. Yeah. And even if you do have a bike that can truck for 250, 270, it's still just a really good idea to stop if you can. A well planned ride should ideally be designed to keep everybody safe, get everybody home alive. And if you have brothers that are too tired, or they're maybe they got a little bit too exhausted the night before and the next day they're riding, if you're not taking enough breaks, I've seen brothers swerve on the road. There's a lot of potential really bad things that could happen. Um, so rests are good.
And I think part of that, when you're riding with your brothers and you're riding in a group, is taking ownership over yourself,
Hmm.
but also taking ownership around those around you, right? Is like if you see your brother swerving or struggling, at the next rest stop, go talk to him. Be like, hey, brother, I saw that you were, swerving. Are you doing okay? Are you tired? Do you need an energy drink? Do you need to rest for a little bit? Is be mindful of how you and yourself and your body is, interacting with the ride, and, watch out for clues for how your brothers and those that are in the group are riding, around you.
Hmm. Yeah, be your brother's keeper, right? That's what we're
Yeah.
supposed to do. If a brother, like you could have situation like this is one thing that can happen in groups of men sometimes is we're prideful shits. And sometimes if something's bothering us, we can go forever and not complain about it or talk about it. The problem with that is when that, whatever that issue is, starts to become a safety issue for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. The ideal situation is you trust the people you're riding with. You understand they have your back. You understand that they've planned well and can make auto corrections on a moment's notice if needs be. Always better to communicate needs than to just keep your mouth shut and hope that a horrible thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, so I think this kind of leaks into our next thing. We've talked about preparation, and now we've talked about, some key. We were also going to touch on some keys of a successful trip. And so I think some of that bleeds in from preparation, keys of a successful trip. And we've talked about, having plans and following through with those plans and clear communication. Um, Also looking out for your brothers, right? Uh, I think that's a key element in a successful trip is, watching out for your brothers and making sure that they're doing good, right?
Yeah.
What are some other elements that you feel like make for a successful motorcycle trip?
So the next part that I think I want to go into is just like the mindset, like as far as contributors to a good trip, because there's a couple different elements to that mindset, and it's we're going to go into different aspects of it, but it's basically all centered around being a team player, um, not being selfish, being a helper. Um, I've seen, I don't know, maybe some of you all watching can relate, but we all have that friend or that family member that is the worst to travel with ever in the world. And I'm not just talking motorcycle trips, I'm talking in general. Like, comment if you have anybody that you know who is just the worst to travel with. And I'm curious, I bet we're going to get a similar answer. What personality aspect would you say they have that makes them a poor travel companion?
I mean, speaking from my own experience, I think it kind of goes across the board, right? It's the same mentality that kids have, right?
Hmm.
It's that complaining, that immature type personality of like, are we there yet? Complaining about every little thing. I think that kind of goes into it, is that a little bit of immaturity and selfishness is really what it comes down to, right? It's
That's it, Kenny.
that's how kids think,
Yep.
right? Is kids.
Selfish.
Yeah, let's see. I'll show that. Kenny hits it right here too.
Yep.
Selfishness is that's how kids think, because they lack that maturity, and so they think about them. What are they getting out of this? What's their current situation, instead of being like, what's good for the group, right?
Yeah. Like one thing you got to remember when you're riding with a group of other people is that this is not your ride. This is the group's ride. And I've seen this mentality absolutely like almost wreck certain trips because all of a sudden everything's about them. And you have this like middle aged man acting like a goddamn toddler. And that can be such a stressful element. And what I've learned on those trips is when you have someone who's extremely selfish, um, making everything about them, not communicating their needs, holding resentments, is that has a bleed out effect. Um, and it's very hard, especially as someone like you might be in leadership. It is very hard to keep things positive and in a positive mindset if that negativity is getting bled out all over the trip. It's really hard to kind of come back from that. Um, and I don't know, like there's so many things that can make a trip go well, trip go bad, but definitely negativity, negative attitude, lack of positivity will absolutely destroy a trip quicker than anything.
Yeah. So, what do you think about what Lance says here? He says, always running behind, always being the last person ready to go, always having everyone waiting on them.
Okay, that's something. Okay, so this is I'm glad he brought that up. So there's so many things that we think about. You and I have talked about ad nauseum, like endlessly. And that is an issue. I've seen it every trip without fail. There's always at least one person. Sometimes it's the same person, but there's always at least one person that is kind of lagging behind. Now, in that situation, it's very easy to get super pissy
Yeah.
at that person. It's
I mean, I've,
very,
I've done it
I
myself,
have too.
right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have too. So, and this is where like prepping in advance can totally save things because I don't know. When I get pissed at something, I sometimes hang on to it way longer than I should and I'll let it go. But what if you didn't have to? What if we had systems in place to make it so it wasn't a problem? Well, a lot of group rides have systems set up where you have a road captain and you have tail gunners, right? It's their responsibility to make sure that people are in gear. That means, in response to what you said, Lance, what do you do? Like, or your comment about just that frustrating element, people lagging, you set your road captain tail gunners in place to basically set an expectation with them. It doesn't mean you bully that person. You might actually slow them down more if you start bullying them. And I'm never an advocate for bullying, but you basically have one of those people watch and pay close attention. If you see on the trip that someone is consistently lagging behind, you privately, not publicly, this is huge. You don't publicly call someone out because it'll kill the mood of a trip as well. You publicly talk to them about, how can I help you get set up quicker? Here's a recommendation I have. I notice that you're always the last person to use the restroom or get snacks. How about you get in there first? Or we'll set it up so you're first one gassing up. Like there's a lot of things you can do to where you'll never have to worry about said slow person, and everybody else in the group trusts that road captain and tail gunners are doing their job, so they're not going to get super stressed about it, and it just makes for a more it just makes so the trip flows better.
So, in your opinion, is that something that any brother can do to, approach another brother about that? Does that need to be done by a specific individual?
So again, expectations are huge. I think if people before going on a trip understand the roles and responsibilities for, different things on the trip, I think it'll be received far better. And again, we talked about earlier, like having too many cooks in the kitchen. This one brother isn't going to want to hear how he's fucking up by like five different brothers. It's not going to be a good time for him. He's going to get pissed. Everybody's going to get pissed, and it's no good. Make sure you have a set person who is everybody understands is assigned to make sure things are moving at stops. And I found that tends to be the best way to hook it up and get people moving with that particular situation.
Yeah. So, Kyle says never leave that slow person behind. I think that once again, this goes with proper communication in the group, right? We use comms, we use Cardos to communicate with each other. And I think just getting that, thumbs up from the tail gunners to the road captain saying, hey, yeah, everyone is ready. We've had instances on several trips where, we've had an individual or multiple individuals left behind right at a stop. I remember one incident when I was in Yosemite and I was a tail gunner and I ended up staying back, as a tail with somebody who wasn't quite ready yet. Actually, they were still in the bathroom. The group left, right? And it kind of sucked because I was separated from the group for a lot of the day after that. So I would say, yeah, never leave that slow person behind. My caveat to that is if you are that slow person, kind of like what Gremlin said, then you need to like do your responsibility to make sure you're not the last one. In my opinion, one person should not ever always be that last person ready, right? If you're the last person ready every once in a while, that's okay. Like we all have stuff that holds us up sometimes, right? Sometimes I got to call my wife, or, sometimes we all have something that, is going to slow us up here and there. But don't be that guy every time, right? Either you need to figure out what's slowing you down and fix it, or you just need to, stop being so lackadaisical at stops and make sure that you're hustling out your stuff, because so is everybody else, right? And if they're all ready and you're not, then that's, problematic, if that's a constant
Sure.
thing.
Well, and that's where it comes into, like, again, like I said, it's kind of a broad subject, but mindset. We want to have a team mindset when we're on a trip, meaning that we're very aware of how our actions affect other people, and how we speak, and how quickly we prepare for writing, just all of it. And so I think if you have that right mindset, you will be the ultimate traveling companion, and people will love traveling with you.
Yeah, I think Kenny brings up a good point. You talked about making corrections with people in private. And Kenny talks about here, yeah, make sure you do it in private, because they might, be struggling because they're not in okay mindset. And so if you expose that in the public, then it could just, make it go nuclear.
Dude, 100%. And I know a lot of people in this chat can relate, but motorcycles, my therapy. That means when I'm riding, there's mindfulness happening. I'm working through some shit a lot of the time. And that means sometimes I'm like, everything might not be firing as quick. So never just be a dick to be a dick, because you never know what's going on in someone's head. Private conversations with stuff like that go far better. And we speak to this as people who have made mistakes. We we've blazed a lot of trails, at least within the context of our own group. There's a lot of things we had to learn the hard way. And so that's why, I'm glad you invited me over your shots, because this is such a good opportunity for us to sit down and, talk about stuff we could do better, because there's a lot.
Yeah. I agree with you. And, I think one of those big things that we've talked about, once again is, and I fall victim of this too, is just be positive, right? Especially after you've been riding all day long. Sometimes, it's been hot outside. It's been a long day. Maybe you didn't get as much sleep as you should have got the night before. Sometimes you're just irritable, and I get irritable towards the end of the day sometimes. But sometimes I just need to remind myself, hey, this is what we can just calmly work through this, and this is going to be all right, right? Everything's going to be okay. This is an awesome life I'm living right now, right? I'm on this beautiful trip, and I've seen some amazing stuff. I'm with some of my best friends and my brothers, and I just need to remember all the positive things that are going on and be positive and being like, how can I help the group, right? What are things that I can do to improve this situation? And just make sure that I'm not adding to the negativity, and I'm not adding to the problems, that I'm being a contributor, right?
Yeah. I don't know. There's a time and a place for everything, right? And like I mentioned before, how sometimes when we ride, we're working through shit. Um, it's important that when that happens, you do your darndest to not project anger or however you might be feeling onto someone else. Um, it's easy to do sometimes, and I get it. Like, trips can be stressful, and that's, again, this we talked about why we like trips, why we like taking our prospects hang arounds out on stuff like this, is because you really get to see what that man is all about. And it kind of, like I said before, it peels off a lot of layers. Um, just one thing to, I guess, be aware of, mindful of, is if that's happening to you, first have the mental intelligence, the emotional intelligence, to not project those things onto other people. Again, easier said than done sometimes, but if you're aware of it at that shortcoming beforehand, it could help.
And help your
And
brothers, right? Like if I
yeah,
see you going down that rabbit hole, be like, hey, brother, like
sometimes
everything's
catch
gonna
them.
be all right, man. Like everything's gonna be cool. Like we're just going to get to where we're at and we're going to hang out and it's going to be a great night, you know?
Right. Like, hey, I see you're being extra right now, and talk to me. I want to know what's going on.
Sure.
And that doesn't invite judgment. You're not, you know. I know we might be spinning off onto something a little bit that is going more so into brotherhood, but I think it is paramount because people, I've seen it so many times where people, they might get a little extra vulnerable on a trip, and it's just stuff to be aware of. But yeah,
No, I mean, I think when you talk about we might be going off a little bit on brotherhood, maybe, but I think that brotherhood is
it's valuable.
I think brotherhood is one of the key reasons why I go on motorcycle trips, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so I do think they go hand in hand. Um, but I think another thing that you and I have talked about, several different times is, safety is just keeping everybody, safe as well, right? And that could mean a lot of different things, right? What are some safety things that you've seen come up on trips? Some
Um,
safety issues.
so some low hanging stuff is bad planning can result in safety problems. Case in point, if you plan too many miles in a day, and I get it, we all want to be badasses, we all want to do like 800-mile days like maniacs, but there's some areas where you ride through at night, and it is teeming with every creature on Noah's Ark, and you know, a mouse, small rabbit, not a big deal. An antelope, a deer, that'll kill someone. And like I said, you can't eliminate all threats on the road, but planning your ride in a way that prevents you from riding at night is like a huge way to prevent a lot of senseless issues that can happen.
Yeah, and so I agree with you, right? That's a huge thing is time constraints. I talked about that a little bit earlier, right? Is be aware of how much daylight you have left in the day and how much time it's going to take you to get somewhere. We when we ride in our groups, we ride in formation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Typically, we're riding in a tandem formation or side by side or handlebars to handlebars, right? Um, we do change our formations depending on the situation, right? If we're going to go through a mountain pass or we're going to go through a canyon, then we usually change the stagger. Um, if the road's narrower and a lot of curvies, then we'll change the single file, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think being aware of your situation and adapting to change your writing style of the group to in that situation to keep everybody safe, I think is important. And also, if you're riding in a group of two or three, right? Are you going to ride the same way that you're riding in a group of 20?
Hell no. It
Okay, so I think that this is important, right? Is like the speed changes, right? Sometimes the tightness of the interval changes a little bit. Um, so I think that those are all key factors, to keep in mind. And the road captain or the people up front is it's not about being selfish. It's about keeping everybody safe, right? And so you as a road captain, you're not out on your own personal joyride, right? You're leading
yeah,
the group. And I
yeah,
think that's an important mindset to keep, in mind when you're on road trips like this.
yeah. I mean,
It's about the marathon, not about the sprint, right?
yeah, you're doing the long haul, and the biggest goal, most important thing is bringing back everybody home safe. So if there is an element in planning or in whoever might be leading the ride that is causing safety issues, that needs to be considered. How are you riding? What's that term that they always say? Like ride for the conditions you're in. Like you're constant. Like this is something we all know as riding motorcycles is we're constantly adjusting how we're riding depending on the conditions, time of year, temperature, weather. There's a lot that can change how you might ride. Number of people, like you said, is a big one. I might ride a little bit more spirited with a smaller group of people. With a big group, you want to ride at a steady, safe rate. Obviously, you don't want to go slow. You want to go the speed limit, but you want to be going at a steady rate, and that can help a lot. And same things for like general writing tips too, right? Like making sure everybody understands hand signals. And there might be some hand signals that are used on a long road trip that you might not use on like a weekday ride. Um, being aware of where people's gas is at. Like a lot of this stuff is just helpful for knowing for general safety.
Yeah, and so on the trips that we've been on, has everything always gone according to plan?
No, no, and that's something to factor in for sure. You have to actually almost plan on things going bad, or at least be ready for the possibility, because more often than not, they do. And you need to be ready for that. And I get it. Like someone, who might be a bystander to said thing going wrong, it could be frustrating because you took off X amount of time and here we are having to stop at the side of the road, and that could be frustrating. But I think everybody needs to leave room for their mental bandwidth, a little space in the tank for things to go wrong, and being ready and willing to cope with that when it happens.
Yeah, it's just adapting, right? I mean, I think that ability to adapt is a huge deal, right?
Anything that
Yeah,
can
we
go
did take
wrong
time
will
off.
go wrong.
Yeah,
Murphy's Law. Okay, just
yeah. But yeah, Murphy's Law, right? If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And that's a pretty good example of that, right? And I think I've never been on a trip with a lot of brothers that there hasn't been something that's gone wrong, right? Or multiple things that go wrong. Or, I'm waiting on the side of the road till 1 a.m. waiting for brothers to come back, with a truck and trailer that we got to get a brother's bike on, right? So it's just that willingness to adapt. And I would say, yes, you do all that prep work ahead of time to make sure those things don't happen. But if they do happen, it's not the end of the world, and it's a growing experience, right? It's all about your outlook and how you look at it. Is you can say, "Oh man, this is the worst thing ever, and I hate this trip, and this is a waste of my time, and I can't believe I took work off of this, and I just wasted my money." You can look at it that way, right? Or
yeah,
you can look at it and be like, man, that was a crazy night. And yeah, we froze our butts off and that was a great time. We were out there in the middle of the night, just, messing around, waiting. It's all about your outlook. And
yeah.
I
There,
would say, for me, it's about building memories, right? These are memories that are going to last me a lifetime, and building brotherhood with these individuals. Everything's not going to go perfect, and you can have um, good memories from bad things that happen.
yeah, and honestly, I love those types of personalities that can make a bad situation livable. Like you said, Mav, that you can be an absolute asset to your group if you can maintain the right sort of headspace mindset in a stressful situation. Because like I said, it's so easy to sit here now, we're comfortable, we're sipping on beers and whiskey and to talk about this stuff in theory. But you get out there a long day, you're exhausted, maybe there's a couple little things that you've noticed that have gone wrong and they just build up as the trip goes on.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to let that just burn you out. And if you can be that guy that just can laugh something off, stay focused, help a brother out, invaluable on a trip.
Yeah, and think about how you can do that for what value that's giving to your brothers too, right?
Hmm.
And I would say that would be one of my pieces of advice for everybody is look for opportunities to make memories, right? Whatever they are, Um, sometimes it's going to awesome landmarks that maybe are just like 25 miles out of your normal way, and it's something that you've never seen before. Go make the time to go do cool stuff, and go do fun stuff with your brothers, whatever it is. Make memories, and you can make memories in the good things. You can make memories in the places that you go. You can make memories um, amongst problems that just end up in your path, right? I think Ratchet mentioned earlier about how he hit a cow. He's never going to forget that, right? And so, and I hope that that memory wasn't a horrible memory for him. It was a horrible thing that happened, right?
It could have been way worse,
But it
right?
could have been way worse. And now we can look back on it and joke about it and laugh about it, right? And it's a memory we all share.
Right. And it's something we're able to learn from. Like those situations, you got to, it's easy to be negative about trips ruined, but we were lucky. We were able to learn from that and be better, so helpful.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny says it right here, right? Most bad situation will be a story for you and your brothers to laugh about over a beer later. 100%. And,
Mhm.
a lot of us, sometimes that's how you get your nickname as a prospect, right? Is shitty stuff that's happened to you on the road, right? Or funny stuff that's happened to you on the road. And it's all about, the memories. In my opinion, is like, it's
Yeah.
all about getting to know your brothers better. It's all about the memories for me on trips. And
Yeah.
you're never going to experience anything like it.
So on Lance's most recent comment, if you want to pop that up there. So as far as a lesson learned goes, I find that the more strict your trip is, the more you're setting yourself up for failure, right? And we all have those types of personalities. Like, you might have a parent or you might have a buddy you've been on a trip with before, where everything has to be scheduled. We have to be here at this time for this thing, for this activity, and there's no room to move. I highly recommend setting up a loose itinerary. Like, here are some big bullet points that we would like to hit, but kind of the mindset I've done and that's helped me is I look at a trip as like big one long continuous thing. Like, so long as I'm with my brothers, my best friends, I'm having a good time. I don't care where that's at. I'm going to make the best of it. And like you said, looking for opportunities for maybe a little bit of impulsivity. Like, you're riding through a hot desert, riding through some mountains, there's a lake. God damn it, jump in that lake. Do it every time.
Love
Yeah,
it.
you might be late to your scheduled dinner appointment. You might have to cancel reservations with someplace you might have set for dinner or change a location. Like, that kind of stuff is what will stick with you far longer than, oh, we were able to hit all our times and we're able to see all the stupid landmarks, which we have the rest of our lives to
Yeah,
see.
go ride dirt roads for miles trying to find hot springs that aren't there. Like
Yeah. Get off
you
the
gotta
beaten
you gotta
path.
do it.
Talk to
So
some locals, man. Like, I don't know. There's so much fun to be had outside of the box that is a specific itinerary, and just be open to that. And we call that rolling with the punches. That kind of personality is going to have a much more enjoyable trip, in my opinion.
yeah, so trips can be a lot of fun, right? And we often uh, enjoy ourselves at night with partying and a lot of times drinking, right? We have guys in our club who don't drink as well, but we often do indulge in drinking and having some nice, finding a cool place, a cool diner to go eat some good grub at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think my other comment is this is like, have the fun, right? But know your limits. And I know that I've been victim to this problem too, right? Is like overindulging with the liquor because I am just loving hanging out with my brothers and I just don't have a care in the world. But man, oh man, I can tell you riding hungover for 500 miles the next day sucks, right? It
Yeah.
sucks.
And
And
it's
so
unsafe, right? Like,
and
if you're
depending on
if you're dehydrated
how
and
much you drink
tired,
the night before, it's not safe, right?
yeah.
And so I would say know your limits. It's like have fun, but know your limits. And
Yeah.
also like I would say the same thing with sleep and rest, right? Is like if you are up till 6 a.m. and you guys are leaving at 7, is that's not a safe thing for you to be at either because writing can be very, can fatigue your body right, pretty easily, right? And so I would say make sure that you're getting some type of rest, right? However that is, even if it's just relaxing more at night, but make sure that you are in the right place, mentally and physically to be writing the next day and know what you're doing. Now, if you're going to be having a more chill day, and you guys are just going to be hanging around town and, visit some of the local spots, then yeah, rip it up the night before and have fun. If you have the ability to sleep in the next day, do it. If you guys are going to be up, at 7 a.m. and you guys are hitting a 600-mile day, be mindful of the agenda, right?
Yeah, like think about it like this. Best case scenario, you are without question going to be dehydrated and exhausted. That by itself, and there's some people that just hold on to booze in their system for way too long. That's a whole other issue and why it's important to know your limits. But best case scenario, let's say it all goes through your system. You're going to be dehydrated, you're going to be exhausted, and that makes you a risk for everyone else around you. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, like we've learned this too. We used to have stricter schedules, but we've learned over time that you set up a loose itinerary, um, but that can have its cons, and I'll explain one of which. And there's one major element to a loose itinerary being a con, and that is failure in real time communication on a trip. So yeah, if things are more in the moment, it's important to communicate with people around you about that, like what plans are. And again, making sure that people have the right mindset beforehand, and that will make all the difference. It's sometimes unavoidable. Sometimes there can be miscommunication on a trip, and you'll have to auto regulate that and adjust and fix. But the more preventative work you can do with communication, the better.
Yeah, so I 100% agree, Graham. I loved having this conversation with you and this time to reminisce on some of our trips and our lessons learned. I think we'll take a couple more comments and we'll start wrapping this up. And
Deal.
we got one comment from Mav, and he says, Gremlin shots, what have been your absolute most epic trip and why?
It's so hard to answer. There's moments from every trip that I could probably pick something out. Even trips that might have had some negative aspects or some hard lessons had to be learned, I can still pick things from those trips that were just incredible. Um, I don't know. Some of my fondest memories are like the impulsive ones. And also, like, there's something about just being completely exhausted. And I know some of you guys who've been backpacking with friends can relate to this as well. When you're just completely exhausted and, you're able to connect with your brothers in a way that I feel like you can't replicate on a day to day with the hustle bustle of life. And so for me, those are some of my best memories is some of the impulsive adventures and the long conversations, just how to be better men. That's where I've gained value. Dream trips for the future. Well, maybe I'll let you answer that. Shots answer, Matt, because it's a good question.
Yeah, no, I think I'm in the same boat as you, brother, that I think it's hard for me to put my finger on it because they all have different aspects of it that are awesome. I think Yosemite and Sturgis were probably my favorite destinations, right?
Yeah, as far as
And
quality of roads
as
and
far as quality of roads and
oh,
what
the
you're
roof.
viewing and what you're seeing, right? But when we went on trips like the Four Corners, and it was just like a straight up solid brotherhood trip where it's just
Yeah,
like it's solid. You're pounding pavement every day. You're spending a lot of time together as brothers, and I love that aspect of it too. And so I don't think I actually have like a favorite trip, but I do know my whys is what make trips my favorite for me. And I think that is going to cool new places I've never been before, and I think that is having awesome experiences with my brothers.
yeah. As far as trips
Dream
to the future, either the northeast or the west east, the west coast is definitely something I want to hit. Like the northwest coastline, particularly, would be a ton of fun to explore.
Yeah, that's what Kenny says, right? The Northeast Coast or Oregon Northeast Coast. I
East
think kind
Coast
of going down
confuses
into
me.
California would be nice too.
Yeah, I've always wanted to ride through like the Northeast too, like Maine, Vermont, like check out, see what like riding to Canada maybe. I don't know. I forget sometimes that we're bordering other countries, and maybe there's exploration to be had, like riding up through Glacier into Banff, or
Yeah,
there's just so much. There's just so much. Like we're really fortunate. There's so much incredible landscape and roads and history to be explored. And there's nothing better than doing it with your brothers.
I agree. Lance says the redwoods. We rode through some redwoods when we were at Yosemite. That was gorgeous. There's some redwoods up in Northern California and Oregon. I'd love to ride through someday if I'm that lucky.
Mhm.
I would say my dream trip is to fly over across the ocean, and I don't care what bike I'm renting, but just go through Scotland and England,
Hell yeah.
cruise around and check out some castles. And I think just to do what I love, but do it in a completely different atmosphere, I think would be awesome. And I think
That's a big
I would love to plan doing
bucket
that, especially with
list
some of my
for
brothers, is having that experience where you're just cruising through some castle areas and some beautiful coastline,
right.
something that's
Stay
out of
at
a movie.
hostels at night, hit up the local pubs. I mean,
Yeah, cheer
I think
some
that'd be
locals.
incredible. Yeah,
Love
dude.
that.
It'd be fun.
So, all right, brother. Do you have any final comments for us, Graham?
No, I just want to say I've gained a lot of value in this conversation. I think it's been good. It's been fun to reflect, because you and I have shared so many memories together, and it's fun to talk about, things that mistakes and things that were successful. And we're not claiming we're the masters of how to do trips or big trips, but I'll tell you this, we've gotten way better since 2017, and we will continue to get better. And I look forward to spending more trips with you, brother.
Yes, and all of our brothers, and I think I've mentioned this in one of the other videos too, but I think this is one of the things that motivates me to go on, future trips, and is we're always constantly having new brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a lot of those experiences with you, and I love having those experiences with you, right? And I'm
Sure.
looking forward to a ton of experiences with you in the future. But also, we have a lot of new brothers too. And I think, you talked about earlier is you learn a lot about somebody from these trips. And I think that's one of the things that I look forward to on going on these trips is, getting to know these brothers in a different perspective and, get to peel those, onion layers off of them, like you were kind of
Mm-hmm.
talking about, and really kind of get to the heart and soul what some of these new brothers are about. So
Hell yeah, absolutely, man. There's so much to be gained on these with new people.
cool. Hey, well, we appreciate everybody for watching the show, and thank you very much for your comments. I think you guys all had some very insightful comments, and Gremlin and I are both in agreement that we're looking forward to our next trip, and we hope that you all can make it out, and it's going to be awesome. So
Hell yeah, guys. Have a good one. Thanks for joining the discussion.
yep.